There you go. Apparently the technology works.
We got it eventually.
4 weeks it's worked.
So should we do the little, we don't really do sort of intros, do we? But let's introduce and say we have Dave Porter here with us tonight. So this is that's as good as our intro gets. Dave, over to you.
We did the little tiny one for Alan last week, but no, you introduce yourself, Dave. Tell everybody who you are.
I don't think they're ready for that information. Let's see. First degree black belt under Master Pedro Sauer. I've been with him for about 8 years. Before that, due to active military service, I traveled around a bit. So I came to him late. I was a purple belt when I made my way over to him, and there was no looking back ever since. Fairly active competitor, now school owner, and arm and choke aficionado.
Yes,
David Porter, aka Dave Darce,
aka Darce Vader. Yep, there's a million of those.
So sort of our intro is that we obviously met Dave when he came out to Iceland, and when we went out to Iceland for a summer camp there, and got to hang out and mainly extract things from his brain. I don't think we shared anything for him, so we just took. So how's exciting lockdown for you?
Fortunately, I'm in a position where one of my good friends and I are together for this, Robert Martin. He's been also helping me with live streaming classes Tuesdays and Thursday nights for my school out in Washington. And so it's good to have a training partner and good friend to be locked down with. One of my friends who you'll eventually meet because he's like my heterosexual life mate. His name is German. And it's one of those things where once you meet him, he's immediately your best friggin' friend, but he also is a terrible influencer who makes you do things you normally wouldn't do. So you can imagine how with my personality, where I'll try anything, he gets me into a lot of trouble, but somehow we come out of it unscathed. And he's the reason I have things like this bottle of Pappy and, things nearby. So I won't tell you the story of how he got that bottle. It's too much for this live audience.
So how long had you had the school open before this all kind of hit? How long had you guys been?
So the school is actually about to celebrate its 1-year anniversary,
Okay.
May 1st of last year. So I went out to Washington State on the west coast of the US to open the school with Jeff Shaw, who's been a good buddy of mine for almost a decade. And Jeff is probably the person who is more engrossed in the jiu-jitsu culture than anybody else I've ever met. That's saying a lot because I've met a lot of people who consider the knowledge of jiu-jitsu like their biggest hobby, and he takes it to the next level where he runs the Dirty White Belt radio podcast. He's interviewed Master Sauer. He's interviewed tons of people, but he's just so involved in the community. He's done charity efforts for everything from Teddy's children's project to helping with his alma mater school to renovate and move. He's done things for different charitable organizations from, everything from like debate teams to women's shelters, you name it. And he is using jiu-jitsu to better the overarching communities of the world. And so partnering up with him was an easy choice because I liked his mission statement and his attitude. And we decided to bring it to this void within the Pacific Northwest, where we were between Seattle and Vancouver, British Columbia. And there was really just nothing there. And when we opened our doors, we were fortunate to start with about 50 students and steamrolled that into about 200 within a year. So we're crushing it.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Right.
big. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
What was the draw for that particular area? Was it that there was nothing there, or I know you like the rock climbing? Was it being close to the mountains?
Elbow grease. We did a massive push through marketing, and we had everything lined up so that Google ads, all the social media sponsored ads, even just like beating our paths along the local business trail and putting up actual flyers to talking to anybody and everybody leading up to it, so that by the time we opened our doors, we had an influx of people from the club we had initially been a part of to the people that we had reached out to within the greater area. And so having a good wholesome message, a great website, communicating those points, and then when people come in, the retention tool wasn't just the fact that it was a clean and wholesome environment, which is a big thing for a lot of people, but it's also the fact that the techniques were stellar and they had been in kind of a technique devoid state of life for so long in that region, where it was just a bunch of, blue belts who don't know anything, or, different caliber people who are, peddling their wares, but didn't really do much more than dabble in jiu-jitsu. So for us, he coming in as like a seasoned brown belt with lots of time on the mat. He's been to seminars with the Mendez brothers, to Dave Camarillo, to you name a list of people, and he's done seminars with them. And then you guys know myself and my background, so we brought a lot of firepower, and it was big, but never once stopping to tailor the program for the lowest common denominator so that anybody and everybody can do the jiu-jitsu that we offered. And that was the big selling point, and people loved it.
It seems to be
Jeff already out there. Was that where Jeff was already?
So he was based out of a club for a little bit, and it was an MMA based school. And I just want to talk nomenclature for a second. I think our word choice is important. And when we reference Bellingham Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we reference the academy. The same way that when I mention Master Pedro Sauer, I mention it as the headquarters academy. When I refer to places as gyms, I think of places where you go and you work out, and it's usually, somebody who's semi-dressed, grunting in a corner somewhere. And
that was Pete.
That
was Pete earlier.
That's cool, and I think there's a time and a place for going to gyms and working out your body. And I think there's a time and a place for understanding that jiu-jitsu is less physical and more mental. And we're really learning neural pathways and ways of moving. And I could talk about that a little bit later, but we're trying more to get away from calling it a gym. We were out of a gym. Now we're in an academy. And people see that difference the second they walk in, and that's what they want.
Yeah. And we definitely find that having the self-defense aspect and having, like you were saying, a club that teaches to people that are new walking through the door, not necessarily focusing on the superstars and all that kind of stuff, makes such a difference to, like, we tried other clubs, then we came here and just felt like we were at home when we kind of got on the mat with you guys. So, and I think that's down to the way, Professor is and how he passes that on to everybody else and how he makes everybody else feel like that. And then we just try and replicate that in some respect, some form,
Yeah, and you guys are doing a terrific job. I just remember the little bit in Iceland when we were all together. Quality control is massive for any organization. And say what you want about terrible fast food chains, but the ones that do well on a global scale keep that quality control high, even for their terrible product. So that no matter where you go, if you go to like a McDonald's, a number 4 is the same no matter where you go. I love that within the Pedro Sauer Association, we can talk about the standard curriculum and people know the language. So seeing you all doing that stuff, and not just doing it, but doing it well, showcases how tight the community is within or sorry, how tight our association is within the greater jiu-jitsu community. So, you know, hats off to you guys for carrying the torch high and strong in the British Isles.
Yeah, thanks, man. We just follow the lead. We just
Do what we can.
yeah, do what we can, watch what's going on, and follow the lead of the guys that have done it already. And yeah, we know, we have faith in, you know, the curriculum and the system, and that's all we, you know, that's all we need really. It's great. We can just take that on, like you say, because it's kind of packaged in that box. We can just replicate and do the best we can with it over here. And we're slowly catching up over here, I think, to before all of this, obviously with the States, in terms of people knowing what it is and knowing what jiu-jitsu is, and like trying to get there with that. But I think we're still a few years away from you, behind you guys, and obviously still not everybody knows in this, you know, in the USA what jiu-jitsu is. So still loads of growth to go, hopefully.
We're not quite mainstream yet, but we're on the fast track to getting it that way. Master Sauer would usually say, you'll know we've hit the mainstream if you can go into like a parking lot and just pick a random person and say, hey, where are those people that do that grappling on the ground in the weird pajamas? And they're like, oh, jiu-jitsu, it's over there. When that random person knows it, you know, we've broken through to the mainstream. But if you were to say that, they'd probably go, oh, karate, I don't know. You know, it's just not at the forefront of the consciousness of masses of people yet. We're getting there.
Yeah.
So am I right in thinking, Dave, that you no longer compete?
Correct. Yeah.
How are you coping? So I remember when I met you in Iceland, you were phenomenal with your retention, your sticks. He's coping with the whiskey. No, but you used to remember all of your stats for your competitions, how you did all of your different submissions, how you managed to get all your victories. You know, dare I ask? You showed the whiskey, but what have you replaced that with?
I don't think I've replaced it. I've steered my motivations within why I did those kind of things to begin with, and I put them into a more wholesome package that has a longer shelf life. So I'll be 37 in a month and a half, and I've lived 5 different lifetimes. And when I talk to people about the things I've just been through, it's the miles, not the years. And so, you know, a complete stranger who hears some of my wild stories, they'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe you've done all that and you're only, you know, 36. But my body feels it. So I talk about being aged in dog years and all the injuries I've sustained, and it's just not something you can keep up forever. So for me, taking my knowledge and the things I've learned from stepping onto those mats with, you know, everyone watching and referees and having to compete under different rule sets, from the Hicks and Gracie Cup to a more, you know, points driven tournament, to other things, to submission only, no time limit, all submissions legal. You know, I've done heel hooks in the gi against black belts. I've done things like Fight to Win Pro, which is a huge circuit out here. And, you know, you can slam people out of triangles, and I've been slammed in a triangle, or, you know, attempted. And it's one thing to experience those and then take it back and teach your students valuable lessons that you've learned the hard way. And it's another thing to keep pushing yourself just because you're almost addicted to a lifestyle. And it was losing its luster very quickly, where, you know, I'd come back from some of these matches. Like my match with Greg Walker was, you know, 22 minutes long. And afterwards, my face looked like I was in an actual fight. And it was a jiu-jitsu match, no strikes, but, you know, bleeding from my face, busted up. I had, you know, basically been through a car accident in a jiu-jitsu match. And I can show some things that are valuable from that, and that will have a lot of a lot of traction with students, especially because I can reference it and say, hey, this worked at a high level. But there's no sense in doing any more of it. 300 plus matches, what do I have to prove? No one's going to look at me and say, hey, did you try this? I tried it 300 times. So now I can tell you what I think is valid and what isn't. And so it's not like I've replaced the tournaments. It's just I've redirected my efforts. So now I just take my knowledge and I give it to students that want to go compete or potentially, do the dumb thing and try to fight for money. And I can at least tell them where they'll reach some level of success and where the friction will be. So I still do the normal stuff that I was doing even when I was training. Like I'm a big nerd. I play video games. I play board games. I have a lot of fun hanging out with my buddy Rob in German and getting into some of that stuff here. And when I was in the Pacific Northwest, I was running, small groups of like little strategy games and stuff like that. And that's how I spend my downtime when I'm not on the mats.
That's good. And the stats. So obviously not keeping track of the well, I was going to say win, lose, draw record, but it was more win, win, win record. But did you are you keeping track of anything else in the same way that you used to?
I still do. I still have all of those metrics. It's this weird like jujitsu eidetic memory where I can't forget those things, and I can recall what the weather was like outside on October 14th when I grappled so and so, or November 11th when I grappled Chris Savello, and then I went to an after party in Philadelphia and partied with the Marines, and I can tell you every single detail of those matches. It's still up there, but now I track students' progress. So I can tell you when my buddy German got his blue belt. I can tell you the last time I striped my student Diego. Who you name a student of mine, I can tell you their progress, and now I'm tracking that. And one of the things that'll always make Master Sauer smile is I can tell you every single person who has gotten rank any day in the last 8 years.
Don't doubt.
What's that?
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, I'm not going to test you. I believe you. We tried some of this when we were with you in Iceland, and yeah, you win.
I can barely with lockdown remember what day it is, let alone when I kind of start merging together a bit. What do you think? Oh, go on. Sorry, no, go on.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of days of lockdown, I saw a really funny quip where someone said, day 37 of lockdown, haven't had sex in 6 months.
I love it. No, I was going to say, with the competition stuff, what do you think? I mean, you said sort of how it helps you with your students now, like being able to advise them about competition and stuff like that. What do you think personally was your biggest thing that you got from it that you then translated into the jiu-jitsu that you do, the Gracie jiu-jitsu? Because a lot of the time, I wouldn't say Gracie schools discourage competition. There's kind of this friction between the two things sometimes, isn't there? The idea of the self-defense and the competition, and we all know that the self-defense techniques are the same techniques you use on the mat when you're rolling and kind of stuff like that. But how did the two things mesh for you?
It's weird because I've taken Hickson's approach to this for a long time, and Master Hickson Gracie, he went out and proved that the things he learned and the knowledge he had was viable in a fighting capacity. And I think the reason why you don't hear of how many world championships has he won? And for him, it was never about sport jiu-jitsu. He loved putting his jiu-jitsu to the test where it was more showcasing the self-defense aspects. Can he stop a punch? Can he stop somebody from slamming him? And so what was interesting for me was I would go to tournaments where they were point tournaments, and you see a lot of what's called anti-jujitsu. You know, people will do things to not bleed points in a match that would get your throat crushed on the street. You know, I don't turtle. I just don't believe in cowering and covering up, because now I can't see how many people might be coming up to kick me in the head. I started fighting and martial arts training with traditional martial arts, where it's all predominantly stand up. And when I did Muay Thai, I wouldn't want to ever turtle up in a fight, because now someone's going to do their best Sakuraba impersonation and wind up soccer kicking me in the head. So I don't want to ever go to a position in a jiu-jitsu match like the turtle, just because someone was about to pass my guard. So I don't want to give them 3 points. So I'd rather give them an advantage. To me, you're letting the rules protect you. I got to say, one of my favorite formats to grapple under is no time limit submission only. And the only times I've done that, there were still certain rules that I would disagree with. And not to like call out specific promoters, but you know, I do like how in Fight to Win Pro, they allow slams. And I think without adding strikes, adding slams does teach you a few things. Like if I triangle you, I have to underhook your leg, because if I don't, I'm going to get picked up and slammed. And if I don't underhook your leg and I get picked up, I better bail the move, because I can't then complain later on about, oh, well, I can't believe you slammed me. Well, I could slam you. And in fact, name any martial arts movie or movie that has jujitsu in it where someone does a triangle choke. Tell me what happens in that movie. You know, it doesn't matter. Yeah, every single time. There's no time where, you know, barring when God, what was it? Lethal Weapon 1, when it was Jorge and Gracie with his awesome mustache, and Mel Gibson, you know, where he basically is like in the scene telling Mel Gibson like how to get out of the triangle, and then he just gives up. You know, barring that, I can't tell you a time where I've seen an actual triangle finished in fight choreography in a movie. But the realistic part of it is most sport jiu-jitsu guys, gals, I don't even know if they understand that that's why you underhook the leg. They probably just think it's to get angle. And it's like, add slams, make them understand why. So when I would compete, the way I would reconcile it was I would play to the rules so that I wouldn't get disqualified. So if it was, you know, blue belt gi match, I wasn't going to do knee bars, but I'm actively trying to win as opposed to actively trying not to lose. And I feel like most sport jiu-jitsu nowadays is, especially at the black belt level, it's 9.5 minutes of two people actively trying not to give up points, and then 30 seconds of the end of people putting on a loose toe hold or something, and then making the poopy face like to get the ref advantage. And that's not jiu-jitsu. And I think the people that matter within the community who have tested this art agree with me. That's terrible for this sport, because we're changing it from a sport that used to favor position because the position led to dominance in a fight, to now these positions just have arbitrary numbers associated with them, and people do whatever they can to not give up those positions. If you're passing my guard, I'm not going to spin and roll out of it and, you know, potentially get punched in the back of the head and show my back to my opponent, but that's what's happening. Or, you know, these grips where people will grab on with their hands to somebody else to prevent, you know, somebody else from passing, but you're stopping them from moving to a position that's given a certain value, but the other person has their hands free to just punch you ruthlessly in the face. I would like to bring up something that I started about a year ago. We have the school in Bellingham being, you know, just about 30 miles south of the Canadian border. And we have a lot of students that work for Border Patrol. And they would come in and I would talk to them about self-defense and, you know, how I reconcile sport versus, or what I would do in sport situations versus what other people do in sport situations. And I said, Go back. Tell me a time when someone in a jiu-jitsu match had the opportunity to, cock back a fist and punch me in the face if they had the chance. And you'd be very hard pressed to find that even in a lot of my black belt matches. So I made a deal with these guys about a year ago. If you can even just touch my face in a grapple, I'd give you a free private lesson. Guess how many I've given out?
I'm going to say none.
Yeah. And this is verified, like these guys, they know it's game on every single time we play. Even if we're doing like a street clothes class, which I highly suggest everyone does at least once a month if possible, but once a quarter for sure. Find out what would work in a fight in terms of grips. Because if you grab this sleeve right now, you think you're going to control that arm? No. Grab my wrist, grab my actual skeleton, right? Control the body, not the clothing. Now, can a collar choke work in this shirt? I think it can. Now, the likelihood of it working in this specific shirt versus like a collared shirt, it's a little bit lessened, right? Hunter Gracie loves to show the rolled up t-shirt method. And if you can make that bar, it has value. How long do you have to make that bar? You better get your timing down because it's going to take you a while. Just reaching up the back and collecting the material in and of itself is showing some of your cards, as Master Sauer likes to say. So if you can get there, great. But if you can't, you're going to have to rely on something else. So there are techniques that I say are possible or plausible. And then there are techniques that are high percentage. How I reconcile sport jiu-jitsu and the things that I would do when I would compete is very simple. Go for the things that are high success rate, work within the rules so that you're not getting disqualified, but don't try to actively not lose. Go for the win. Go for the things that are effective and try to get it done. So, long answer, but that's the mindset that I can now give to my students and why they find so much success when they travel.
That's cool. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Perfect. Because we have people, we don't have many people sort of wanting to compete, but we have the other person sort of mention it now and again. And I think that's the attitude that we'd want them to have, is that whatever the rule set, whether it's points or whatever, they're going for the win and the submission. And, if that happens, the other way around, if that doesn't happen, at least they're making the attempt to make it real and apply a self-defense element to what they're doing, rather than just, like you say, just making a face or blocking, half blocking a choke or attempting it just for an advantage point, Yeah.
Well,
You're on mute.
So how long ago did you start that deal where if you touch your face, you give away a free private? Where were you in your jiu-jitsu journey?
I specifically told these Border Patrol folk, we have this guy, Big Sean and Ron, and they came up to me specifically to talk about some detainee handling procedure because they understood that I did some of that when I was in the Marine Corps. They knew that I had, been to a combat zone and dealt with, taking in high value people and processing them and doing biometrics, but also patting them down and taking them against they're resisting. So controlling another human being is one of the hardest things you'll ever do on the planet Earth. You can deadlift tons of weight, but then still not be able to subdue a human being. And anybody who's ever tried to put a diaper on a toddler for their first time knows that small child is going to kick your ass. They're going to do things to make you not do that because they're resisting you. And you have to learn specific techniques for doing that. Otherwise, it's going to be a pain. So imagine you make it a 200-pound baby, it's really hard to subdue another human being. So they came up to me, they asked for some techniques and I showed them a bunch and they were like, wow, this is incredible. Why doesn't our department do this? I don't have those answers. The people that cut the paychecks need to figure out how they're allocating their resources, and they're better spent going to jiu-jitsu base for any, non-lethal force type issue instead of, just trying to get people to comply based on having a gun in their face. if you can get someone close up, you can put them in a position where they're compromised structurally. You know, you take out their posture, you take them off their base, you put them into a pinning position where they can't move, and you don't have to be using pain compliance. But if I can pin you on the ground, I own you. And at that point, I can do whatever I want, even if it means reaching for flexi cuffs and then, you know, binding your hands. And then I showed them everything from how to get someone to the ground as safely as possible or as aggressively as possible, but not hurting ourselves. And then how to get them back up once we've bound them. And they loved it. So then they were like, why don't people do this in jiu-jitsu matches? And I said, watch mine. I do that. I do that in jiu-jitsu matches. And they were like, so you're telling us that if we were to grapple you right now, we couldn't, like, you know, hit you or, you know, grab your belt, or, you know, I make zones. Like I'll say, today, if you allow me to touch my own belt line, you lose. And if I can touch your belt line, you lose, as if we had holsters with pistols, or, you know, maybe you have a knife on your pocket. And you make these little games, and it makes people have this different set of awareness. So for them, the awareness drill started a year ago, and it was, can you touch my face? And they've never been able to. And that's been a lot of fun. But we have some law enforcement professionals that work with us too. And I've extended that game. We do the street clothes classes, and that's a lot of fun, especially because some people will take it to that next level and wear like a costume or something crazy, and then you choke them with their costume. Anything you bring to a fight can be used against you. So that's a valuable learning tool in and of itself.
Very true.
Yeah.
I mean, with the games and those sorts of things, Dave, is that something that you started earlier on in your jiu-jitsu career, or is, you know, like, so the touch the face, you get a free private? Would you have been offering that deal when you were kind of brown belt, purple belt, that kind of thing, or is that just a more recent thing?
I don't think there would be a problem with a purple belt doing that if the room's full of white and blue belts. You know, you have the skill, and it's only going to sharpen your game as they get better as well. I didn't until the last few years, but I remember when I got to Master Sauer's in December 2012. I remember when I first, you know, checked out the place, I saw people doing a game where everybody had to hold 2 tennis balls and grapple. And if you drop the tennis ball, it was 10 push-ups. And not that anybody was making the objective to like swat the tennis ball out of the other person's hand. You're actively trying to win, not make the other person lose a tennis ball. But trying to win without using grips was eye-opening to me. Just taking a major component away. And to this day, you know, like just a week before our area went into lockdown, I was training at this place, Pure Performance, which is a Pedro Sauer affiliate. Marco Sampao, Dennis Barangan, those are 2 of the black belts that had been at that facility for a while. And now they have Teddy Bisrat. Teddy's a good friend of mine. He just got his black belt recently. So you have all those black belts training there from under Master Pedro Sauer. And one of the last classes I went to, Dennis was like, here, pulled out a little mesh laundry bag full of tennis balls and started handing them out. And for the sake of argument, not because I'm a show-off prick, but, you know, I grabbed 2 tennis balls in each hand. And, you know, I didn't lose them. And I was still, you know, Darce choking everybody, putting them in the Bravo choke, holding 2 tennis balls in each hand. So, and, you know, my buddy can verify, he's sitting here. He wasn't one of the victims, but he was a witness.
I like those little games personally. I think those sorts of things keeps it all fresh and kind of keeps it all exciting. And I think when you take something away, you learn more, you start to use other things more. So it helps me massively.
It's a good counter, right, for when people are injured as well. It gives them, I think it helps. You play those kind of games and they realize that actually, oh, maybe if my wrist hurts or my shoulder hurts, then I can still come and train, because we play these games where we tuck one belt in the, you know, one hand in the belt, and we only grapple with one arm, or the tennis ball game, or I think it helps people like understand that they don't have to be 100% every time to be able to come train as well.
Yeah, we sometimes forget two very valuable things about jiu-jitsu. The first is that it's an activity based around consent. When we do like the slap, bump, go, that's you and I consenting to a grapple. And then the tap is us consenting that it's done for that particular session. Now, that's the soft aspect of jiu-jitsu where we say, you know, the gentle art. The only thing gentle about it is the beginning and the end. Everything in the middle is violence. And you have to reconcile those two things. So if you slap bump with somebody and they go a little too hard for you, you have to consent that you're done. Even if there's no arm lock or choke, if it's just too violent, just tap and just be like, okay, cool. And when they go to reset, say no. You don't have to grapple that person. You have the ability to consent when you want to grapple. So if you're injured, you know, I've seen everything from like red tape on a sleeve to saying like, hey, not this arm, and then have somebody go for that arm anyway. And it's like, before the arm is extended, just tap and be like, hey buddy, what's wrong with you? And now you've ended the grapple and you can find somebody different to train with. Oh, but there's still time on the round. Well, sucks that you don't know how to train, man. Better luck next time with somebody else. And one of my good friends and occasional adversary, Cody Malte, man, I met this guy at an event, and we've had, you know, multiple matches over the years. And I can say he and I have some of the most similar processes for developing our students, and also very similar games. And Cody does this thing where once a week, his students will just get used to saying no to a grapple. And this was implemented by someone he had taken on, Samantha Fallhaber. And she's, you know, prominent black belt in her own right. And she teaches most of his gi classes. And Samantha instilled this, and Cody loved it. And he just indoctrinated this to where his students get used to saying no to grapples. And then the opposite happens. You get so used to hearing it that it doesn't offend you. You're like, oh, okay, this is just a normal thing. You're allowed to not grapple somebody. You're allowed to be okay with someone not wanting to grapple you. And maybe it's a size disparity, maybe it's, you know, something else, but it shouldn't hurt our feelings. There's going to be tons of people on the mats to play with. Just because that one person didn't want to work with you that one time, you don't know the reason, and it doesn't have to be spelled out. And I think that's great. So the bookends are consent, right? The start of the grapple and the end of the grapple. Everything in the middle is violence. And if we say it's not, we're lying to ourselves. So when we get to the point where we can understand how to navigate that violence so it's not hurting us or hurting them in an unintelligent way, now we're doing good jujitsu. So another way to summarize that, oh man, I'm gonna need a sip of water for this.
Make sure you pick up the water, not the whiskey.
Well, this is just electrolytes and caffeine, but it's just water. The whiskey's for after. There are 3 phases of body control. Phase 1 is mastery of self. So think of it like walking, jumping, doing a cartwheel, shrimping, right? Now making it more jiu-jitsu related. You do an activity where it's just you learning to move yourself. If you can't get that material down, how are you going to be able to do it when, even if the person is compliant and helping you, just the added weight of another person or the friction of their body near you hinders your movement, right? So you have to start low. You have to start with phase 1 body control. If you can't master your own movement, the next phase is going to be miserable. And phase 2 is what I like to call concerted effort. So when you think of people being in concert or in harmony, we are working together. We're reading off the same sheet of music at the same timing and tempo, right? That is partner drilling. We are not doing a move with specific resistance in mind unless it's specified, but usually in the beginning it shouldn't be. It should just be, use my body for your movement so you learn how to move yourself around this friction. And you do so much of that now that you can get into the 3rd phase, which is contested effort. Now, while I'm actively trying to stop you from doing this move, you've built up enough awareness of how to move yourself and how to move around another human being that now you can do it while we're resisting. And if you get good enough at that, this weird thing happens where it's not like that was the end goal. The end goal of beautiful, good-looking jiu-jitsu is when phase 3 looks like phase 2. When you hear those words that everybody loves to hear, oh man, it's like I gave that to you. When you hear that while grappling, you know you've done phase 3 jiu-jitsu, but it looks like phase 2, where they're resisting you, but it looks like it gave it to you. You've gotten the technique down so good that your catching is like Master Sauer's, where no matter what you do, you're just going into the trap and you don't even realize it. So, trying to make that happen within the bookends of that, the gentle art, right? We consent to grappling and we know when to stop. But in all of this chaos, trying to make this just nice and smooth, that's tough. It takes years.
Unless you're a natural.
Yeah. Who's the natural though, right? There are so few.
Oh, so I saw when you were talking about that, I saw Robin start to chuckle. I remember a conversation in Iceland about you look like a natural.
Yeah. Yeah. I naturally would do, 12 hours of jiu-jitsu a day. I would naturally, take ice baths at night. It's still one of the most offensive things in the world to me. You can tell me that my mother's a whore. You can tell me that I'm a terrible human being. You could say some of the worst things in the world, and I'll just, blink and smile. But if you tell me I'm a natural at jiu-jitsu, we're probably fighting.
Just to be clear, David, I wasn't saying you was a natural.
Flights are cheap right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get a private flight all the way for the same price as a regular flight.
Yeah. Awesome.
No mask included. But
so on that point though, in terms of not being a natural and continuing to work at it, I mean, what are you working on at the moment? Now you've attained a level in the art that most people kind of dream about. We always hear people say, you start learning at black belt. Where are you at in your journey? What are you working on?
Making it easier for the next generation. I'm passing along all of my dirty secrets to my students, and I'm trying to make it so that their leg of the race is smoother. Jiu-jitsu is not like, it's not like our style of jiu-jitsu versus like a Machado lineage or a Gracie Baja lineage. All of jiu-jitsu is running their lane of a relay race. And in the other lanes, you have other martial arts. It's like us dealing with karate, dealing with this, dealing with that. And as someone who came from a traditional martial arts background, I've got no problem saying this. We are far and away better than the others, right? As a complete system goes. We have our flaws, and we've talked about them a bit, but we still have ways to go. And I think that our level of improvement in just a short period of time is massive, and it cannot be understated. But look at what the founders of the art did and how much they left for like Hickson and Pedro's generation. And then look at what those two have done. And now, whether you like to admit it or not, but all four of us are in this third wave. And what we then do for that fourth wave is critical. And at every leg of the race, the previous generation has to run side by side, and the next that second wave had to catch up so that we can time it to run side by side for the handoff on that baton. So as Elio passed on all of his stuff to Hickson and Pedro, they got to a point where they were good, and they still looked up to their master, but they were more than capable of now taking off with that baton for their leg of the race. And now you look at, whomever, whether it be, you all, myself, Alan, all of Pedro's products, and you know, there are varying degrees within that scope, but yes, we're all getting ready to grab that baton for our leg. And I think we need to think about that. And how we deliver the material is super important, and teaching does not come easy. So by honing your craft teaching, that's what's going to be the big thing for whether we as a martial art start losing track or losing place on that race, right? We're in first place right now. If we want to be relegated to the past with other martial arts that I will not name, Hapkido, you know, we want to fall back, and we want to start losing that you know, that lead. It'll start where people get really headstrong about what they can physically do, but they're not learning a craft and how to teach it and give it to the next generation. So I'm fine tuning the ways in which I deliver the material so that it's easily digestible, even by people that would, you know, typically struggle with it. Older folk with injuries, heavier set people, maybe someone with a disability. And if I can teach the mechanics to any folk that have anything less than just God-given talent, right? You know, if that's the only people I can teach my craft to, I'm not a great instructor.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So you're measuring it by kind of the person who finds it the hardest rather than the rest of the population kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, my three of my 5 best students, and I have no problem picking favorites. It's easy when it's quantifiable through the ability to execute the material. 3 of my 5 best students are people you would never expect. So like the Academy Award-winning actor, Robert Duvall, his wife is, you know, I'm not gonna give her age. You can just do an internet search for that, but she's not a younger woman, and she has a small frame, and yet she is one of the most technical students I've ever produced. My best student is barely over 100 pounds, and she's an 18-year-old girl, and she will crush everyone in this chat right now, including myself. And when I took her to Brazil last summer with Master Sauer, she was at Gracie Humaita, and she was rolling with blue and purple belts, and she was just, you know, having fun, smiling the whole time as she's on their backs, putting them in chokes. And, you know, Hulker Gracie himself had to call in Pedro and be like, what's up with this sandbagging little girl? And then Pedro pulls me to the side and is like, when are we giving her her purple belt? And I was like, on this trip, don't worry, it's a secret. It's fun.
Yeah, we've got, I don't know, have you got a kids program running there as well now?
Bellingham Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has 0 kids, 200 adult students.
Wow.
It's not like we hate kids. When I say we, I mean the 3 owners, Jeff Shaw, Betsy O'Donovan, and myself. I hate kids. They're not opposed to the idea of eventually running a kids program, but none of us have the mental capacity for it. And I will say this. Almost every single one of the most heartbreaking things that have ever happened to me in jiu-jitsu all came from kids programs.
Okay.
Kids quit, kids get hurt, you feel responsible. It's something that you have to have a burning passion to do in order to want it. And although a lot of people out there will say it will float your program and it will be the reason why your program does well, I don't think it's absolutely necessary, especially if you tailor a program specifically for adults. Then it becomes the destination location for those people. So we have a 0 kids program. We've had many humans try the classes and they like it, but then ultimately they'll wash out because there's no one their size. So we're happy with the attendance we have, and it's doing fine on its own. If one day we decide to run it, we finally found a guy who, you know, very good black belt. He was talking about how he has this kid's curriculum that he loves and he wants to run it. You know, go with the powers that be. I'll give you the ominous dominus and you do it. But I'm not going to get involved ever again with teaching kids.
Fair enough.
Just when you're talking about sort of it sort of rang bells for me and probably Bill as well, because we kind of, and Robin teaching, we've had the kids program for about a year now, and we had we just started another kids one. They're kind of separate from obviously from the adult classes, and talking about little prodigies coming through that you can't wait to unleash on unsuspecting adults. There's a few of them that I'm going to be kind of like when they're old enough, just a little whisper in their ear before they step on the mat. And they're going to give people nightmares.
Yeah, my student Natalia, I was her first instructor when I was teaching kids at the Pedro Sauer headquarters, and you know, one of the hardest experiences of my jiu-jitsu upbringing was watching her get her neck cranked really hard, and she almost quit jiu-jitsu. And it would have been a crime against humanity as far as jiu-jitsu goes if she had quit because of that. So, you know, now knowing how much farther she has gotten in jiu-jitsu after having stuck with it, I don't think I could go back in time and really appreciate how much that made a difference for me as an instructor. To work with kids was a huge boon, but it was also such a headache. And like I said, it was emotionally distraught because, or I was emotionally distraught because I would see kids with talent and just quit. As their bodies change, they get older, their focus changes, they want to pursue other things. You know, it would suck to see someone who is physically capable and, you know, they have every bit of their brains like unlocked at that stage. They're not like us as adults when we come into something and we have a lot of self-doubt, or, you know, we come in with our mental hangups because we're just conditioned to think a certain way, whether we know it or not. Kids, all those neural pathways are blank. So you teach them something, they pick it up super quick. And then you're like, oh man, this person's going to be a terror. And then they just stop paying and showing up. And you're like, what happened? They're like, oh, they found Xbox. You know, like, I can't do that. The swings are too great for me. It's like no limit Texas Hold'em. Like I can't play. The swings are too big. Right.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, no, I understand that. And hey, if you got enough on your plate, if you've got 200 adult students, then that's plenty to be working with, right?
Yeah. Plus, some of them are kids. Mentally.
200-pound kids.
Yeah, you know, and that's the thing that's kind of the unspoken part, which is, as instructors, we have to be, you know, part therapist. We have to be part marriage counselor. We have to wear so many hats, because when people come in, as much as they're adopting this new way of life, we're adopting them. And as friendships grow and you have to navigate different personality types, you know, this student doesn't get along with this student, or, you know, whatever else that comes about. And to keep the peace and everything that comes with it, we, you know, kind of become mediators. And I don't think enough jiu-jitsu instructors talk about that. And we're not qualified. We're just human beings that are trying to keep our business from burning to the ground when one student A wants to kill student B. And we're fallible. We're just people. So if someone's like, just because you're a X belt at whatever doesn't make you a black belt at this, and it's like, you're right, but I'm the pair of ears you came to, so I can hear your problems and I can do the best I can. And I usually just recommend people seek professional help, but you know, that's the unspoken thing.
So I think when we saw you in Iceland last, you were at 62 or 63 entries for the Darce, for the Bravo.
Oh my God, yeah.
Volume 1 in the can at that point. Are we going to get a second volume at any point, or?
Yes. So I'm actually in talks right now with a buddy of mine, Chris Garcia. I gave him all the raw footage from my first 2 filmings. I filmed once in North Carolina, and most of the footage got corrupted and was unusable. And so I had to refilm it to make the DVD tutorial as you know it. When that was released, there were 47 setups that made the final cut. And there were tons that ended up having to end up on the cutting room floor. Now I'm up to 91 entries. And it's insane. So I want to film everything that wasn't put out. I want to put all of the things that are still out there. I want to just compile them and put them into a better searchable tool and do it all online and digitally rather than through the discs. I mean, anybody who's watching this and anybody who cares can pirate that stuff easily. I found out about 3 years ago that most of it ended up getting pirated and just put on Reddit anyway. So for me, putting it on a site and just making it a little bit more accessible, lowering the price point and just doing away with physical copies. People want this to be on a mobile phone and have it on a tablet or something next to the mat. That's where you're going to drill it. How many people even have a DVD player anymore, or care to find it? So changing the medium, changing the frequency or not frequency, the availability and doing stuff like that. Yeah, I'm going to put more stuff out, but
Nice.
It's never ending. And
what led you in that direction in the first place when you first started kind of getting involved with going so deep into that one particular move? What was the spark that made you go, "Ooh, I need to develop this"?
It's interesting. It started with the fact that when Mark Kukro, are you familiar with Mark?
Yeah.
Down in the Carolinas. Mark's a good friend. And when I had first met Mark and I was a purple belt, he was a brown belt, he came to visit the headquarters and he was teaching a class. And this was back in an era when Pedro didn't even know my name. I was still amigo. Hey, amigo. So Mark came and taught a class. It was May 1st, 2013. And first time I met Mark Kukro, he's teaching this class. And this kid, Cameron Kingsbury, who no longer trains with Pedro's, he asked the question. He was like, well, what about, if someone shoots a Darce choke from that position? And Mark goes, well, show me. And Cameron, as a fledgling blue belt at the time, was like, I'm not good at it. So I just know it could be done there. So Mark asks the class with Pedro watching, okay, who can do this move? And I'm the new guy. I'd only been there for like 6 months. And I raised my hand. I'm like, I can do it. And so I shoot the move. And it generated this snowball effect where everyone started, now we're going down this rabbit hole. We're asking all these questions. People are asking me about the move. And Pedro comes up to me and he's like, oh, my friend, you're pretty good at that. I would stick with it. And I was like, oh my God, I should stick with this. And, within a few months, I started really hammering down on it and kind of made it my own. Now, I had learned it in New York City through my travels when I went to Renzo Gracie Academy, and I was a white belt. And I just knew it as like a move that a lot of wrestlers would like. And coming from a wrestling background, I really just put it in my back pocket and took it with me, but never thought for a second that I had anything special. And from that time, that time where Pedro recognized a certain level of proficiency with it, I went in the deep end with it, and there's been no turning back. But it's unfair to, let me go back. It's kind of like people who can't, see the forest for the trees. It stands out so much because most people don't develop that thing, that it would be hard for someone to look at my triangle, my triangle with my legs, and see it as something other than the triangle that you all do. And that's unfair because it is a little different. Or, my toe hold mechanics, my ankle lock mechanics, whatever it is, we all have our value in a static form of these movements. But then when our body types get involved and our knowledge base, we change it a little bit. And some of the things that I've advanced for myself are very different. But people will jump to the Darce mechanic because there just weren't a lot of people doing the Darce mechanic. So for me, it stood out. Whereas, you know, my toe hold is very different from a lot of other people's toe hold. I'm trying to think of things that are a little bit more specialized. My ankle lock details, things like that. And Haldor, you know, he's very familiar with it because he's taken a lot of private lessons with me on those things, and he shared some of it. My guard passing systems, my maintenance of certain positions, but people just, you know, they harp on that because it's the thing that I became most known for. And I kind of shot myself in the foot when I took ownership of that through Instagram, and I made my name Dave Darce for like, you know, 7 years, to the point where when Professor Mauro Suarez came to Bellingham BJJ, third degree black belt from American Top Team, he started referring to me as Professor Darce. And I was like, oh shit, I got to change this name. So, you know, this year I rebranded myself on the Instagram. I got rid of Facebook, and most of that is just because I'm tired of American politics. So I got rid of Facebook so I didn't have to deal with the big orange-faced weenie. And then with Instagram, oh yeah, it's a free country, so I can say that. You know, he's not going to kick down my door.
You might tweet about you.
Oh, that's okay. He's already telling people to inject Clorox into their lungs and shit. So whatever. He's a moron.
That and get internal, what was it? Internal UV.
Yeah, you just need to add heat. So, yeah, we're all a package of ramen noodles to him. We just need to microwave ourselves and we'll be fine. But, you know, 30% of the country will still vote for him in fall.
Is that like his origin story?
Is that why his hair looks like ramen? Like all those wavy noodles, you know? Maybe. There's something to that. His brain is definitely microwaved.
Oh dear. So, do you feel like the actor who's that one big role has defined them? They're trying to escape, that role with the Darce.
Kind of, but you know, fortunately for me, my friends know where my talents lie, and it's not in just one move. So the great thing is, when I do these live stream videos lately while we're all under lockdown, I'm getting some great questions. People understand that there's more to it than just like, where's the Darce here? You know, I go and I'll do a seminar on whether it be half guard or the back or, you know, whatever the seminar topic. And without fail, every time someone would be like, where's the Darce? And it's like, listen, I'm not your dancing monkey. So if you ask me to do this and you just want show and tell, I'll show you all the different places I can hit this. And we're wasting all this valuable time that everybody else is paying for. And now you just happen to be that person. So fortunately, I'm getting to the point where I'll go and teach a seminar. And like the last time I did one, the host for the seminar said, all right, we're going to do this at this point. We're going to do X amount of this. We'll do a Q&A. During the Q&A, keep it on topic until he says otherwise. And it's like, just right on top of it. It's like, thank you. Yeah, it's tough. I don't want to be typecast as that specific thing, but you know, I have a penchant for chokes for a reason. Even within the hierarchy of my jiu-jitsu statistics, you'll find that my arm locks are only about 20% of my finishing submissions, and lower body attacks, leg locks, are about 30%. And a lot of that is because it's hard for you to hit me if I take you off balance and break your leg, and then I can walk away and you can't follow me. And then 50% are chokes, and it's because you can possibly low crawl after me with a broken arm or broken leg, but if I put you to sleep, the fight's done. So I love the choke more than anything. So I don't care if I choke you with your gi, with your own arm, with my arms, with my legs, however I can get the choke. That to me is the pinnacle of success in a fight.
Nice. Well, it's good that you're getting it all down on getting all the Darce stuff down and getting it out there, because then that helps. It means you don't have to answer the question every time. You can say, go and see my online resource.
Yep. And some of my good friends have already done their little bit to put their stuff out there. So I had mentioned Cody Malte. He has guillotinesystems.com. And Cody's got one of the most wicked guillotines I've ever seen in my life. And the way he breaks down with arm in, arm out, what they consider to be the escaping side and how that's not an escape within his system and how he still gets the movements, it's incredible. And then my business partner and good friend Jeff Shaw just did omoplata systems. And it's incredible how he dives into the omoplata and goes over everything. And within our academy, we have kind of like how you would do like book clubs back in the day, and then everyone would read the book, come and then talk about the book. We're doing that with our academy on his omoplata systems, which we made free to all of our students. And so they've all had a chance to go over it. And now this weekend, we have the book club for omoplata systems. And he'll do like this with all the students going on to Zoom and talking about the omoplata systems. Well, I'm going to do the same with, you know, the Bravo system. So it'll be cool. I think there will be a lot for the next generation. And then, you know, whereas Jeff Glover and those guys came before me, and now I'm that guy. I've got more submissions with it than anybody else in the world right now, more than Edwin Najmi, more than Glover. There will be somebody to surpass my numbers someday, you know, because as Bill was saying, you know, I'm done competing. So my numbers are finite. Somebody else is going to come along, take my system or Glover's or whoever, and just skyrocket. And I can't wait to see it, because it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see what they're doing different, or, you know, what's the same, what changes, you know, it's going to be great.
So not wanting to be known for a particular move, and obviously there's so much other things that you're aware of. One of the things that I remember, it sticks in my head from when we were training in Iceland, that you gave us was, you know, like not 2-on-1, but 1-on-2. So where you take two limbs with one. It's a lovely, lovely concept. And I find it pops up quite a lot whenever we're trying to explain things to people. It's really nice, easy to grasp. Do you have any like favorite kind of gems, pearls of wisdoms that you wouldn't mind sharing today?
Absolutely. Let's talk about that for a split second before I get to the new thing. Most competitors in sport jiu-jitsu spend too much time not thinking about equity. I want to make trades where I come ahead on the trade, and that's easy to understand, but doing it with energy. If it takes me 2 of my arms to arm drag you, how good is my arm drag? I am using more to beat you. Now, if I can do that same arm drag with one hand on one hand and like a little movement, now I've got a really good arm drag, because the scales are even. If I can make that arm drag happen without using my hands, I would be magical, right? And it's weird when you see Master Pedro Sauer do something and you're like, wow, he only used his foot or his big toe. Like the person is doing something crazy. You're like, how did this happen? It's because he understands that equity and how to make the better trades. I'm not going to beat your legs with my arms. I'm not going to beat your core with my legs. So now to get into the newer stuff, how I teach people to make better trades is by understanding not just musculature, but where in your body you have the denser bones and where those bones can find power through structure, because structure beats strength. If I have someone very small and, you know, they don't even have biceps, they just have seps, right? Like I make that joke, they're just like no musculature. If they find the way to frame properly or move themselves and have spinal alignment and then put their hips behind it through active toes, they're going to be strong, because their structure beats their musculature. And typically speaking, if I'm playing half guard, when I show people how I do half guard versus, say, what I call the half guard of desperation, when you just lock your legs around someone's leg and now you're dry humping another human being, I put in a knee shield and I have an open hook. I have tensile strength with my bottom leg, keeping you from just kicking back and sprawling. So I have pull. My top leg is at a particular angle and with very, very specific mindfulness for where my contact area is to prevent you driving in. So now I have push. With that push-pull and being on my side, it takes almost no energy to hold that position and stop you from both running away and coming forward without adding a lot of energy to the equation. So that's good equity because my legs are beating your core. And that shouldn't be the case because, like I said, legs beat arms, core beats legs. But now my legs are beating your core. So I'm going to be ahead on anything else you add to the equation. Because now when you start to, do a weave pass, your arms don't beat my legs. So now you're just going even further down the pecking order. And I still have my hands and I haven't done anything yet. So I get to these really great equitable trades and people don't even understand why they get put into these like overhook positions of mine. And now their posture's broken. I have a hand in the lapel, their arms extended like this. I still am in the same half guard I never left. And they're like, what? Why did this happen to me? And they can, cry to the heavens all day. Why me? And it's like, well, because you didn't understand this process of what is more valuable and where. So as I start teaching my students about spinal alignment, active toes, and rolling your hips forward, they have these incredible jumps in success with basic moves, where it didn't matter what the move was. It could be the same knee cut pass, but just by like rolling their hips under them and making sure that they're not hunched over and that they have like proud chest and their spine is driving, their toes are active. Holy shit, they just went from, a white belt here to like a blue belt level here on that same pass. And now you have to have them go up against somebody who's not doing that for them to see the difference. But those have been the big leaps and bounds on the efficiency trade.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Great question.
Nice to. I think it's nice for people to hear it, kind of, from the horse's mouth, so to speak. We often quote you on occasion when we're talking about that, two limbs with one, and it's nice for them to hear you talk about it.
So one of Marcelo Garcia's black belts who has gone off on her own, Dominica Oblinice, we had the pleasure of taking her or bringing her into Bellingham for a seminar. 4-time black belt world champion. She knows a thing or two about jiu-jitsu. And after having grappled with her and experiencing like her game and her experiencing mine, we've traded off on a few little bits of nomenclature. So when she does something that she calls sexy garbage, it's things that work for her body type, but not necessarily for other people. Like she's got very long legs, so the way she does her omoplata is different. And then the way I trap people in these really bad trade exchanges, she now calls Dave Brand fuckery. So
that the new Instagram name, is it?
No. I'm still gonna keep Lanky Mongoose, but the Dave Brand fuckery is great because it really epitomizes a lot of what I do when I think about it. And I got to give her credit. She's the one who came up with it. She did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit last week, or maybe the week before, whatever quarantine day we're on. And, that was one of the questions, and it was funny. She mentioned it by name, and I love it. Robin, what's up, man? I feel like you're very quiet.
Oh, I'm just listening.
That's Robin's role on these, Dave. He sits there and he just looks and nods, approvingly when the answers are good.
He does he's doing all our answering to the live stream.
I can't even see the chat. Maybe I should shrink my screen a little bit. How do I?
That's on YouTube.
Yeah, if you jump on YouTube on our channel, it's on there.
So I can't see it while I'm in the Zoom.
No, let me see if there's anything is there any questions on there, Rob, or anything?
I've got time. It's late for you guys, but for me it's early, so I'll stay on as long as you want. And if anybody has questions, let me know.
How does he tell me to tell you that he loves you?
Oh, man, I don't even have to answer that with anything other than my eyes. He knows the answer.
Yeah, he was vigorously beating us up before lockdown. It was great.
It was lush.
Yeah.
Just checking the channels
we've
to
got?
see if anyone's got any questions.
Yeah, see what they have to say.
Dirty White Belt says, "Don't make me stop eating ramen, Dave."
that's my buddy Jeff Shaw who I was talking about.
There you go. Yeah. Who else we got? Oh, nice.
Your friend Joe.
German. I resemble that remark. Hey, cool. Let's see here.
All about that heathen is his love for whiskey.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Hang on. The only thing natural about that heathen is his love for whiskey.
Oh yeah. Did German say that?
Yeah.
Of course. I can thank him for this. Like I said, this glorious bastard found a magical way of getting this $700 bottle of whiskey into my hands.
$700. Wow.
We just got a question from Jeff. He said, "What number is Diego at these days?"
What number is what?
Diego at.
Oh yeah. So he's in the top 20. I think he's number 19. I have a pecking order of my favorite students. And I've got no problem telling them, especially Diego, when he goes up or down on that list. Because usually when he does something stupid, he drops like tens of numbers at a time. And when he goes up, it's like by one. So, the kid, here's the thing. He's a good kid and he does a lot of things well. But it's not about kissing ass or anything like that. It's just he has this way in which his dry humor comes back to bite him in the ass, and then he gets in his head, and then I kind of, use the pecking order of my or not the pecking order, my list to kind of solidify what he's doing wrong. It's like, dude, don't get in your head. That's why you're number 28. So yeah, I think he's in the top 20 now. I don't know. Rat him out if he's doing something dumb. He'll drop.
So I remember when we were in Iceland, you were messing around with was it Cards Against Humanity, but like a jiu-jitsu version.
Yeah, I haven't dusted it off in a while, but because I've done like moving from East Coast to West Coast. I'm back on the East Coast at the moment. Like it's crazy. But I still have it. I would definitely love to update it. There's plenty more I can do with it. But you also have to get the right group of people together to play it, because some people don't get the inside jokes. Like one time, the question card was Mount has a different meaning for blank. And one of the answers was Lloyd Irvin, and it was fucking hilarious. But you have to understand why that's hilarious.
Oh,
I don't care. What's he gonna do? Sue me over calling him a rapist? Like, screw him.
Love it.
Yeah. What are they gonna do? Beat me up?
Yeah, exactly. What's with the we're talking about obviously the concepts. We talked like it's kind of a little thread that I think is going to end up running through all our podcasts about like concepts versus moves. And at what point do you feel like it kind of, for you, what point do you feel like it crosses over, and what point do you think people need? Do you provide the concept with every move? Do you wait till people are a certain level? What's kind of, how do you kind of work that?
So the way Jeff and I do this is we try to make sure that we have foundations, fundamentals, and open rank. Foundations are classes for people that have never done jiu-jitsu, and we do an 8-week course where it's 4 weeks, 2 classes each week. So it's just 8 classes in the first month of teaching them the basics of jiu-jitsu. You will learn enough in that class to eventually go to fundamentals. So think of foundations just like the word implies. It's just setting that initial base of what everything else is going to be going off of. Then in fundamentals, which is realistically 1 stripe white belt forward, you're doing all the things off of those basic movements and beyond And within that confine, we try to say focus mainly on the things that are like the white to blue curriculum, because even if you quit jujitsu at blue belt, you'll have enough to hopefully defend yourself in a situation against an untrained participant, right? We don't try to do too much fancy stuff there. We want people to have everything at the fundamental level that you expect with Pedro Sauer fundamental curriculum. Now, where things get a little bit trickier is when we go to open rank, yeah, you're going to see the Dominica sexy garbage. You know, you're going to see that Dave Brand fuckery. That stuff is there. Now, is a white belt going to appreciate that? They're going to think it's cool, but can they pull it off? Can they do it in a grapple? No, they haven't gotten through their fundamentals. So the divide that we cut between fundamentals and open rank isn't based on your belt level. We let white belts come to open rank, but we just let them know this isn't really the class for you. Come to the class, but where you're going to really shine is by getting your fundamentals down. Fundamentals never go out of style. And we talk about technique versus tactics. In the fundamentals class, if you were to ask me a tactical question, you're probably going to get shot down. And if it's Jeff, he's going to do it nicely. And if it's me, I'm not. And it's just like the good cop, bad cop vibe that we have. And it's not because I love the image of being the bad cop. It's just Jeff is innately good, and I have to balance that scale. So no, you don't understand. Like, I know Jeff is watching this right now, but he's probably somehow saving the earth as we speak. He's Captain Planet by day. He works for the Sierra Club, and he like shuts down coal plants, and he does the communications for Sierra Club, and that's what he does. I'm not saying I went and like burned down the Amazon wall on this call, but I have to, for the sake of the students, not just also be that, because then I don't want to say we'd be too easily pushed over should someone with a more stiff personality comes along. But it's good to have a mat enforcer, and I have no problem showing people the difference between a mat enforcer and a mat bully. But anyway, that's an aside. With regards to techniques versus tactics, if someone comes into our fundamental class and we were teaching mount, S-mount, armbar, and they go, well, what if, whatever? And it's like, okay, cool. Here's the thing about your what if. You're now talking tactics, and right now we're showing you how to do a thing. Get this technique down before you talk to us about the things that could go wrong with it. Because have you, as the person asking me this what if, done 500 to 1,000 reps on this armbar? Well, probably not. Well, then how the hell are you going to tell me what if? Like, you don't even know how to do this yet. So when we go to the open rank class and there's like a purple belt in there who's probably done 2,000 S-mount armbars in their life, and they're like, hey, I'm finding like when I get into this situation, somebody really hides their elbow or they're doing this. What can I do to increase this? And it's like, cool, that perfect time for tactics. Now let's talk. You have built yourself up on your fundamentals, and you're now moving past technique into tactics. So I try to tell people, give me all the what ifs in the world when you're at my seminars. Give me all the what ifs in the world when you're in an open rank class. But the divide comes in not by belt rank so much as repetition and awareness. When you haven't gotten, however many reps on a move, and you're going to, well, what about this? It's like, man, why does that even matter? Shrimp. Go do that thing. Like, you need that. So, it's one of those.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a lot of sense.
Yeah, everyone's favorite question, the what if.
Yep.
Or I saw this move on YouTube.
Sure, cool.
When you're in a fundamentals class and you're teaching something, like you say, like a basic armbar or how to maintain the mount, and they go, yeah, but I saw this move on YouTube.
Great, they have the internet. It just reminds me, if you were to see like a satellite picture of Earth when the particular part in the Earth's rotation has that satellite on the dark side of the planet, if you saw like cities lit up, you might confuse that for population density, but what you're actually looking at is wealth. Because if you were to look at Africa at night, it wouldn't be lit up, but there's 1 billion people in Africa. The people that go on YouTube aren't seeing it for what it is, right? They're seeing a move, but that's not the same as like being one-on-one with an instructor who can physically put them on target. Great, you saw an awesome move. Congratulations. That's doing you no good, and you're not seeing the right thing. You're looking at it as this person did this thing to this other person in that situation. Now I'm trying to teach you how you can physically do this thing right now. You detracting from my class by bringing up some bullshit from the night before or earlier today does you no good right now. We're right now. And it's that person who has that really skewed perspective of how they receive information. It's like, great, you saw a thing and you're interpreting it as value. It's not that value. It's actually some other value. Do this right now because this is the more important value that will serve you later. I don't have a problem like shooing people off on that stuff, because the people in the class that don't ask those questions really don't want me to waste my time on that person. So I work for the masses. You know, the people that come to class and are the avid students, they're not wasting my time with that. And the people that do, I have no problem letting them know they're on my shit list, and they'll go to somebody else and they'll ask that question. And then I'm usually the one that has to tell that other person, like, cool, I'm glad you want to entertain it, but I wouldn't. And I think you're only, helping that person. It comes back to that whole adage, like you go to a park and it says, don't feed the wildlife. And the reason for that is they have to learn how to, feed themselves. And if you're constantly giving and giving and giving, like when are they ever going to learn how to do that? And one of the biggest things in jiu-jitsu is learning how to make an armbar work for your body type. I know some bigger people that can triangle like the best of them. And yet somewhere somebody said, hey, if you're 280 pounds and 5'10", you probably shouldn't triangle. It's like, why not? I think every technique is valid. You need to get to the point where you can do it. Now, if you have a physical limitation, like you don't have the capacity to use both of your legs, both of your arms, you're going to change your jiu-jitsu. One of the best seminars I ever went to was with Pete McGregor, who can't use not just his legs, but he can't even use his abdominal area. He has no ability to do a crunch. And it was some of the best jiu-jitsu I'd ever learned, because I'd been to Marcelo Garcia, I'd been to all these top level guys, but they're using all the things that I can do. What Pete's doing is so wildly different that when I look at them side by side with the page of notes I took from Marcelo, and I got 3.5 pages from this purple belt, it goes to show you like how broad the jiu-jitsu is for someone who can't use the same things as myself. Like, man, learn to do some things for yourself, and then you'll learn to appreciate the other jiu-jitsu that's out there. That's the nice way I would tell that person. Like, and then if they're still not getting it, tell them to fuck themselves. Like, you're wasting my time. There are students paying for my time, So be nice at first until it's time not to be nice.
I think that was Patrick Swayze, right?
Oh, listen, we have a portrait of Patrick Swayze in our academy. I'm not shitting you. There is a portrait of Patrick Swayze in the academy, and he's in full like naval garb as if he is like an admiral, and it's Admiral Swayze on the wall. And there's a picture of Jeff and I where I'm actually a red coat and he is George Washington, and we did this for the 4th of July in front of Swayze. Yeah, we have fun.
So changing it up a tiny little bit, obviously you as a purple belt, you started to train with Master Sauer.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there the pages of notes. I can't even imagine how many pages of notes you've got about Master Sauer. For those of the club that haven't had the pleasure yet of meeting Master Sauer, what is it that you admire about him? Why? What's the draw?
They say the mark of a master is in the ability to explain a complicated thing so well that everyone can understand it. And if you can't explain it simple enough, you yourself don't know the material well enough. When I call him Master Sauer, it is not out of some archaic ranking system that tells me to call him Master Sauer. I call him Master Sauer because he is a master of jiu-jitsu, and not by rank. He legitimately knows the material so well, and he can explain it in such a way that everybody gets it. And I've been in classes of his where there's over 100 people, not seminars, just classes, over 100 people. And there's white belts, and he's teaching some absolutely stunning stuff where it would seem like he needs a rocket up his butt to propel him into this movement, but he just does it so effortlessly because of his body awareness and his control. And he's explaining every little thing he does, and people figure it out. And they're like, oh, that's crazy. You can do that. And when you see him do these things, and then you hear the crowd just go, oh, like, we've been there. Like, all of us have been to these seminars where he does some mind-blowing stuff, and it's just so simple. And then he goes, oh, jiu-jitsu, it's simple, but not easy. And he's right. It's something as easy as like getting our own knee out of the way when we're turning our hip, or, pushing with these toes as opposed to, lunging forward, or, it's stuff like that. It's why when I got out of the Marine Corps and I could have gone anywhere in the world to do jiu-jitsu when I knew I was going to make it my life, why didn't I go to Marcelo? Why didn't I go to Renzo Gracie in New York City? Why didn't I go to, Hodgers in the UK? Why didn't I go to, I chose him. It wasn't like I woke up one day, I pulled open Google and I looked for the closest nearby school. Like, I went to him, and I uprooted my whole life from New York and I moved down to Pedro's. And I did this just based on my research of everything that was out there telling me he was the most active of all of his generation of black belts. And he was voted, the most, the best instructor in the world by the ADCC board. And, if people like that think of him that way, why not? And we sometimes forget, he refereed Metamoris 2, not refereed, sorry, judged. So when you have like Andre Galvão and all these top guys like Roger Gracie and all these people competing, and he's judging their jiu-jitsu, and things like when Rickson did the Rickson Cup and Pedro was asked to come and do the demo. Rickson Gracie thinks you're good enough to do the demo at his named event. I knew there was something special there, and anybody who's trained with him knows. It's not hard to figure out, especially if you've seen him teach just one thing. I don't care what the thing is, just have him teach it.
Sometimes it's not even about jiu-jitsu. It's the way he describes how you eat a bowl of soup. It's it's just, there's just so many levels.
Yeah, and it takes a weird person to appreciate the things that he appreciates, right? So, for example, on the weekends, when he's able to, he'll go to the Porsche dealership and he'll go into the back, he'll scrub his hands meticulously like a surgeon, and he'll step in front of a stainless steel table with a bunch of parts laid out, and he'll put together some very intricate engine part to these Porsches, and then he'll walk out of there and he'll leave. And they don't pay him for this, and they know who he is, and he does this for free, for fun. Like, that's how his mind is. Like, that to him is exciting and fun, and that's what he does on the weekends. And it's like, think about what he can do to the human body and what he's doing with these like very small parts. If he was like a Rolex watchmaker, it would be the best Rolex ever made, because that's how his mind works. It has to have function. It's based on this idea that these parts go in specific ways, and you're trying to fine tune it down to the smallest detail. And, sometimes people are like, and I don't care. Like, I'll tell Nicky Rod to his face, Nicky Rodriguez, he's a big mongoloid. And he's like, so you just do this technique faster, you know, like I beat Cyborg because I did this move and I did it fast. So you just gotta like go fast. It's like, man, you know, great. I'm glad you did really well in your one tournament at this particular point in time in your life, in your prime, against this guy who's super accomplished but much older, and you came out on top. Congratulations. Can you make me at my size do that move? And you're like, go faster. I'm like, cool, I can't. This is as fast as I can go. Oh, well, you know, I guess you can't do it. You know, Pedro can make people do what he does. And that's what's incredible. He's 100 and maybe 60 pounds, 155 pounds right now. And the last time I rolled with him, he kicked my ass and I was gunning for him. And it's like, you know, we could talk all day about the things I've done in jiu-jitsu and I still can't even mess with the guy. Like anything I do, he's just gonna, you know, thwart it. And he's got fused discs in his neck, 12 surgeries between his two shoulders, pins in both of his ankles, and he's going to be 61 years old this October. And at 61 years old, he still whoops me. Like, come on. There's a reason why we consider him the greatest living martial artist of our time, you know? But you don't need me for that.
If we are ever lucky enough to get Master Sauer onto this podcast, I don't think we need to do an intro. We just need to replay this little homage.
We'll just take that clip. Take that clip.
Yeah, I'm not gonna quote myself as saying I'm his biggest hype man, but I'm definitely one of his biggest groupies. When he would go to seminars within the last, I don't know, almost decade, it didn't matter where it was within an 11-hour to 10-hour, you know, 10 to 11-hour drive, I would be there. And I remember going to Louisville, Kentucky, to Allen's for a seminar that Allen had Keith Owen at. He had Henry Akins, and it was like a 3-day huge event. And I remember seeing like Alan Baker and, you know, like a who's who's list of all these guys that you would expect to see there. And, you know, I show up with my buddy Joe Rudd, and we drove, you know, through the night. We stayed, you know, most of those days to go there and be a part of it. And when we got there, he looks at Joe and myself and he's like, why are you guys here? You train with me like Monday through Friday. And it's like, well, we also know you save some goodies for seminars, so we're here, you know? And, you know, that's the case. I've been to Florida with him when he went to Agogi. I've been all up and down the East Coast for some of his seminars at Suzuki. Obviously, you guys were there in Iceland when I came out with him for that. I've been to Brazil with him 3 times. So, you know, I've done plenty of international travel with him. I was going to be on the last Australia tour with him, and then some things changed. But yeah, I will follow that man until the day I die. And, you know, I've got a tattoo of him on my back, so I'm fairly committed.
I was going to mention the tattoo, actually.
Huh?
I was going to mention the tattoo, actually.
Yeah, I can't break up with him yet, right? Gonna like cross it out. Yeah, even when he's not named, people will still know he's there because of my jiu-jitsu, which is incredible. You know, people will say things like, oh man, I saw that on a Pedro Sauer video. And that to me is like the biggest compliment. If they can associate something I did with something he taught, then that means I'm at least emulating it enough to pull it off as something of his. That's a huge compliment.
That's big.
Yeah. You've got to give. We've got to have you and Keith on a Keith Owen on a Pedro Sauer fanfare, because he's probably your closest rival for the biggest fanfare for Professor.
Yeah. Does he have a Pedro tattoo?
Yeah, there you go. Trump card. I love it.
I don't know a lot of people that have, you know, over 40 private lessons with the guy. And like I said, I was training with him Monday through Friday, you know, every week. When I went to his house, not this past Christmas, but the year before, it was a huge honor to sit down next to him. And we have, my student Luciana with her husband, Robert Duvall, Mike Horahan was there. A few other people like Kristen DeBrucker. And we're sitting down for Christmas dinner. And while Robert Duvall is talking to one of Ann Sauer's good friends and trying to explain and this is Robert Duvall saying this, not Luciana. Robert's like, everywhere Luciana goes, she trains, and they're flying internationally. They're stopping in at name a place, and they've trained there, and Robert's like, I still to this day would not consider myself well-versed in all the things jiu-jitsu, but I can say that Luciana has one of the best instructors I've ever seen. And talking to Ann's friend, and they thought they were talking about Pedro, and he was actually talking about me. And it was like this really crazy situation where I started to get like red in the face, as I'm like, I'm sitting next to this guy. Have you ever seen this guy teach? And then, Pedro, he paid me one of the best compliments he'd ever received. And he was like, yeah, I got to say, Dave's one of the best black belts I've ever produced. And I had never heard those words escape his lips until that day. And when I saw it, I look at him and I'm just like thinking in my head, there's guys like Jeff Curran, Rylan Lazarez, Johnny Carlquist, Mike Diaz, James Garner, I think of these guys as like the pantheon. I've been looking up to some of those guys for longer than I've even done jiu-jitsu, especially like Jeff Curran. When I fought MMA, I looked up to Jeff Curran because he had been fighting MMA forever. And I remember when I had a fight in Atlantic City, I shared a locker room with Jeff Curran, and I'm fighting that day, professional MMA, and I walk up to Jeff Curran backstage. I'm like, oh, it's such a pleasure to meet you. And he's just, not like he blew me off, but he's like, yeah, pleasure to meet you. Got to train my guy. And, I brought it up to him years later, and he actually had to look it up on the internet and be like, oh shit, Dave Porter was on that card. Now he's not just an instructor of mine, but we're good friends. And like we talked yesterday, and it's great to be like, not in that pantheon, but like I'm a peer to Jeff Curran in a form, right? To where the last 3 Florida camps, I've been a guest instructor. And only in jiu-jitsu will you be able to get to that level where you can eventually meet your heroes, so to speak, train with them, and then ultimately befriend them. I can't play a game of basketball with LeBron James if I wanted to. That's never going to happen. You pick an athlete in any given sport who's at the top of their game, the chances of a normal person just working really hard and putting in the time and then getting to meet that person, yeah, you're spending $100 to wait in line to get an autograph and a picture, and that's it. You're not going to be able to do that activity with them. Whereas, I've befriended Rylan when I went out to Hawaii in January. I got to train with him and teach at his school, and same thing with, like I said, all these other names I mentioned, and having the ability to even just talk to James Gardner. He doesn't talk to anybody. The guy is like, almost the boogeyman in our association. We talk about him being the most technical member of the Pedro Sauer Association, and most people don't even know he exists. Guy's super talented, and just he epitomizes everything Pedro Sauer does. And yeah, watching him roll with Joey Deal was like eye-opening. Yeah, we have so much talent. I lost where I was going with this whole thing, but yeah, there's just so much stuff out there. Pedro's one of those people you want to go to, and he bleeds jiu-jitsu every day, and he's fighting for all of us to understand like what he had coming up and where he's brought it. And we're lucky to be alive in an era when we can interact with him, because I don't know about you all, but I never met Elio Gracie. And just on the topic of biggest fanboy, when I got my Pedro Sauer tattoo on my back and I showed it to him on his birthday. I got it before then, waited for it to heal, and showed it to him on his birthday. And I was like, hey, look what I got. And he was like, oh, I can't believe you would mark your body with my face. And it was so funny because I had this prepared for so long. And as he's saying that, and I was like, oh yeah. And I go like this and I lift up his sleeve and he's got a tattoo of Elio Gracie's hands holding his red belt on his arm. So I was like, so you think it's weird that I put my instructor on my back, huh? And he's like, oh, my friend, you're suing me right now. Yeah. So, you know, I'll never meet Elio Gracie, but Pedro is my Elio Gracie. And, you know, like my student German, who's like my brother, Natalia, who is like closer to me than most of my family, you know, they look at Pedro and they respect him, and the same way that I look to Elio Gracie with respect. But to them, like Pedro is just a guy that they've had experiences with him, but to them, it's like it's me, right? And that'll be your students to you. You can talk about Alan and you can talk about Pedro and Elio, and that's great, and they can appreciate it. But to them, it's you guys. It's what you're doing. So it's a huge responsibility, but
it's a lot of pressure.
Those guys are just people. They're just people. And most of them are fallible, right? Like we're all. And man, I don't want to, you know, talk bad of the dead, but Elio, he had a lot of skeletons in his closet. And Pedro, he'll be the first to tell you he was not a nice man. Pedro has sworn me to secrets, and I will keep them. So,
why do you think with Master Sauer, like he's like the best kept secret that we really don't want to be a secret anymore? Do you think that's because he's not a self promoter particularly, and he's not like he obviously doesn't carry the Gracie surname? He might as well, but. What do you think that is? Is it any of those things, or?
I don't think he's a secret at all. I think the people that know, who are in jiu-jitsu to find an effective martial art in case their lives depended on it, know who he is. And people that get into jiu-jitsu as alternative exercise, and they're more inclined to being physical, and then those people typically end up finding their way into tournaments. They'll find more tournament savvy instructors, so they might turn to like Atos or Gracie Baja, or a school that puts competition as a main focus. Pedro's never told me don't compete. He's told me to compete plenty. He wants me to compete. He wanted me to compete even as I was telling him, I think I'm going to start tapering off. And he was like, wow, you're so good at it. Just keep doing it. And, you know, he loved that I would go out there, you know, take a black belt and in under 30 seconds, make them say uncle. And for him, that was the best because it shows that what we're doing is superior. But he's never going to make that the focus. The technique is the focus. So when I had the ability to, you know, tell some people about the things that I'm learning, and they're like, oh, where'd you learn this? Because they know I trained with, you know, Ryan Hall or Riley Bodycomb, or, you know, some good person with leg attacks or inversions, or, you know, whatever it might be. I've cross-trained with some really great people. They'd be like, oh, did you learn this from them? I'd be like, no, that's Pedro Sauer 101. Or when I show a technique in an open rank class that I know the majority of that class doesn't know, but it's like what we would call the white to blue material with us. And they're like, wait a minute, you show that to white belts? And it's like, yeah, that's our white belt material. The people that know really know, and I'll name drop a friend. His name is Jake Whitfield. He's a black belt from North Carolina. And Jake got his black belt through Hoist Gracie. And Jake is one of the first black belts in that region through Hoist, and loves Pedro and loves classic jiu-jitsu from what we know, like jiu-jitsu for fighting, jiu-jitsu for self-defense. And, you know, one of my favorite memories, which is probably one of Jake's least favorite memories, is when Jake had to referee a match of mine and I come out in a fucking luchador mask and I put on this huge spectacle of a match. But when you boil it down and you look at the technique of that match was phenomenal. Like there was such great back and forth where I legit get put into a guillotine and do the classic arm over the shoulder, block the hip, step to the side, and buckle the knee defense. White to blue material from our association against a high-level black belt. And although I look like an asshole, like in this luchador mask, in this cage doing this match, like you can't deny I'm doing really good self-defense that led to a submission in a very dynamic way with really good energy efficiency. So I think for Jake, he was more like, oh my God, I was hoping for something better than this. But the moves spoke for themselves. And when I showed Pedro the match later on, he laughs, but then he's like, oh, that's some good basics, my friend. You know, that's all he cares about. He doesn't give a shit about the fact that I look like the Gimp from Pulp Fiction. You know, he was happy that I did the white to blue material and I can defend myself. You know, I did this great basic mechanic to defend a good move, came out of it, submitted my opponent, didn't waste a lot of energy, and you know, it was good. The people that know really know.
Like that. I think, Billy, we need your signature question. I think Dave will quite like this one as well.
It's about my game.
Yeah, your game.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that actually. So you've got your you know, the Cards Against Humanity BJJ version. I think we need a Pedro Sauer Association black belt top trumps. Obviously, I think listening to you talk, Master Sauer is 100% the top trump. I think if we had to give, as for all of the impersonations that I've heard so far, you're probably up there with the best score for Master Sauer impersonations.
I've been around him so much, and I'd have to check out my notes, but I think I've logged close to 9,000 hours with him. So it's a lot. And when you think about it, you know, there's a lot of hours off the mats in that, because I've been to Brazil with him 3 times. And so you're just with him all day, every day for, you know, 7 to 10 days. And some of these other camps where they're like 3-day long camps, or like when I went with him to Albany, New York for the Hickson Cup, and it was 3-day weekend and we're in the hotel, you know, I'm legitimately having breakfast with him and Hickson. So, you know, just being around him so much, being at his house for holidays, and, you know, when Hannah got hurt in her ATV accident, you know, I did 2 different seminars, and all of my proceeds I gave to the Sauer family. They're like family to me. And so just being around him so much, you pick up his quirks. You know, the way in which he, you know, wears his glasses. I can, you know, wear like 2 sets of glasses on my face and like pretend I'm him, where he does like the double stack of glasses. Oh, let me get my glasses, you know? So
when we've asked the question,
I will throw him under the bus for one thing real quick. And Anne would actually appreciate this, because she knows it's a joke. But, you know, Pedro, I have been present for Master Sauer's first drink many times. Oh, you know, this is my first drink. Oh, this is my first drink I've ever had. I'm like, yep. So I've been there for many of those. In fact, Bill, I have a list of malaphors. So a metaphor, as you know, is a nice turn of phrase that means something else, right? Well, Pedro, we sometimes fail to remember English is his second language. So although he's got a really thick Brazilian accent, some things are lost in translation. So the most famous of his malaphors, where he fucks up these metaphors, is the milk is on the table, right? Now, we know the phrase, there's no use crying over spilled milk. So for him, yeah, the milk's on the table. Yeah, it's there. See? And we're like, but it doesn't mean anything if you just say the milk is on the table. He's like, oh no, it's done. The milk is on the table. No use. And like, but there's no use crying over it. Yeah, the milk is on the table. You know, so he says this so much, and now it's a thing. It's a Pedroism. But, you know, I've heard him say, oh, you know, kill two birds with one leg. You know,
Is that where you got the two on one? Is that where you got the 1-on-2 from?
No, but you know, he said that last year in Brazil, and I didn't record it. I didn't have it on film, but you know, like Natalia and German and JD, Bill Jones, we all heard it, and we look at each other. I'm like, oh my God, it's another Pedroism. He was. I can't say some of them, because some of them he doesn't even realize they're either they have negative connotation. So he'll say things and he'll forget the way in which he says it, especially in America. It can be kind of charged for him to say that. So
we can't even talk about it. We'll talk about it when we finish, but there was one that happened in Iceland last year where the guys from Iceland obviously didn't get it, and I'm standing there with tears rolling down my face.
I bet.
Robin's standing next to me, and I keep looking at him going, he's got a crack in a second because I'm gone.
Yeah, sometimes he'll just say, oh, you know, you get the guy in this position, then you just rape the guy. And I'm like, Pedro, that's not a good thing. Like, we gotta choose some different vernacular here. But you know, he'll say things like, you know, we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Or the one he said not too long ago that had Dennis Barangan and I, like, we were quoting it for like a month and a half. He said, "Oh, you can't make an old horse drink water." And it's like he just took two. Like, you can teach old dog new tricks, and you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And he's like, ha ha.
Legendary. That's a new T-shirt, that one.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, we obviously are not fortunate as you in terms of being able to access all of those black belts. So it's just nice to hear you guys talk about, you know, those black belts in the association that, you know, we really do need to try and get to meet someday.
I mean, Jeff Curran, obviously he was slated to go to Gracie Iceland a few years ago, and then it kind of fell through at the last minute. And he's definitely someone that should be high on the list. Rylan Lazarez is another. Rylan has a very innovative way of incorporating combatives into his programs that makes sense for him. And you kind of look at combatives as a thing that you can give to white belts who don't know anything and give them the good foundations. And yet Rylan takes it to that next level, and he's got guys like Maki and Max Holloway and all these UFC fighters, and they're doing it. And it's like, how do you get this, you know, arguably basic thing to stick in the UFC? And the trick is the delivery system. When you validate it by showing it in action and you're capable of doing it, people will understand it has value. And Rylan is one of those people who's a gem, and most people still don't know who he is. They know who Max Holloway is because, you know, he was the interim champ and such. But how did he get there? Who are his coaches? And you find out one of is Rylan. You know, I'm not going to get into who is still in the association, who's not, who came up. But, you know, one of the guys who came up under Pedro for many years and is a super talented guy who's currently in this area is Nakapan. And Nakapan, he produces such incredible talent. And, you know, he eventually went to Team Lloyd Irvin, and he's still with Lloyd's instructor, Leo Dalla. And it's easy to see Nakapan do some incredible stuff and just take it for what it's worth, that, you know, he learned this with who he's currently with. But he got all of his fundamentals through Pedro, and you'll see some of that as he's moving, and you're like, oh yeah, that's common for us. We take that for what it is. But yeah, I put Nakapan high up on that list. Ricky Lundell, not in the Pedro Sauer Association, so to speak, but got every one of his degrees on his black belt through Pedro. Ricky's a super talent. there's a lot of guys that came up under Pedro that most people just wouldn't even know are Pedro Sauer guys. And look at Ricky, he's trained like John Jones, whoever, you know, whose name, list of names, and he's a Pedro Sauer black belt. It still means something, you know? And anybody who cares will know, and anybody who doesn't understand the difference, fuck them, who cares? Like, it's not on me to sway you to understand the value. If you don't understand it, that's on you. Kind of like my buddy German, if he gives me a bottle of Pappy, this whiskey, and I don't understand the value of it, you know, I'm the idiot. I'm the one who doesn't get it. You know, if he gives me something that should be slowly enjoyed in a long, like a small pour that should be enjoyed over time, and I just take it like a shot, I'm like, oh, that was good. Like, it'll bum out him because he knows the value of it, but I'm not going to be affected by that. I'm the idiot who just doesn't understand the value. Like, you shouldn't really then be upset about me. So at first, you're like, ah, man, can't believe I wasted that. But then you'll go to sleep that night and you'll sleep your 8 hours because you're going to realize it's not worth your time to explain it to that person. Anyway, we got any questions from the feed? I can't see any of these comments, so.
Let's have a quick look. I think we covered that one that Stu asked, haven't we? Stuart on the chat was asking if there's one thing you could be remembered for, what would it be? But I think you've probably answered that in terms of, you know, what you'd like to pass on and stuff from Professor. I think that's about it, isn't it, Rob? Was there anything else on there?
One from Haldor here, just a quick one. He said, how often does Professor Sauer or Master Sauer say, we did this move all the time down in Brazil back in the days, when asked about a new move?
I'll tell you, I've got an anecdote for you guys. So this guy who no longer trains there anymore, when he was a white belt, he started getting really big into like tournament style jiu-jitsu. And he started saying stuff like, oh man, I really got to work on my like reverse De La Riva or my whatever. And we'd be like, yeah, sure, you can work it. And then he would get just crushed. And once again, he's a white belt trying to do advanced jiu-jitsu. And so it was no surprise, like none of this stuff would work, but he would always, you know, the people he admired doing it were great at it. And no matter how much we would say stuff like, you need to work this stuff, he'd be like, whatever, I'll just do this. And it's the magical move. I'll beat you. So one day, Master Sauer is doing a class and he's like, anybody got any questions? And this white belt, Pierre, he raises his hand and he goes, did you ever encounter De La Riva in your training? And he said it just like that. So remember, with the language barrier, Professor starts going off on this long story where he's like, he's at a tournament as a brown belt. He's winning this match. He's winning this match. He gets to the finals and then he loses. And when he loses, Elio Gracie comes up and he's like, how can you lose to that bum? And he's like yelling at Pedro. And he's like, you should have been going for the submission. You tried to play it safe. You did. And like Elio's going off on Pedro. And Pedro's recounting the story. And when he finishes, he's looking at the guy who asked the question. And the guy's like, you didn't answer my question though. Like, did you ever encounter De La Riva? And he's like, yeah, I told you in that story. He's like, I'm sorry, what? And Pedro's like, yeah, I did. And he's like, wait, they did De La Riva back then as a brown belt? And Pedro's like, no, not the move, the guy, Ricardo De La Riva. Like that was the guy he lost to in the finals was Ricardo De La Riva. And so he was telling the story, but because of the way the guy asked, he was like, have you ever encountered the guard? And the white belt's too dumb to know. It's named after a person. So Pedro goes on to the whole story of when he encountered De La Riva. So, you know, there really isn't a lot new under the sun. We can take existing moves and kind of push the boundaries of entries and setups and maybe tweak the finish, but most stuff has already been figured out. The human body has been around for thousands upon thousands of years. And so the ways in which we can make it say uncle are pretty much set in stone. Now, the way we kind of tweak it and add some variations, yeah, there's going to be some new variations, but pretty much everything that we could have figured out Carlos and Elio were, already given such great tools when they were, being taught what they were taught. And then the little advances they made were huge, and the advances Pedro's made have been huge. But now that it's getting to me, it's like, man, I've got 91 ways to situate myself into the Bravo, but it's still predicated on this very simple fact that I'm choking you with your shoulder. And that has been around forever. So yeah, Pedro has seen a lot in Brazil, and not much is going to really impress him. But when you show an old technique with like maybe a new finish, or maybe some finishing details that make it easier to teach your students, that's how you'll impress him. So like when I do the toe hold, that's really impressive to Pedro because it shows a little bit more efficiency of design.
That's cool.
Have to make sure that's the topic for the seminar when you come to the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for maybe like one more. Jeff just came in. Jeff Shaw. He said, "What's your favourite match you've ever seen that you weren't involved in?"
Favorite match I've seen that I wasn't involved in. Yeah, that's tricky. I know I got really excited the first time I saw my friend DeAndre Corbe compete against Joao Miao. I was with Jeff at the time, and we watched the match together, and then we ultimately played it back and did commentary, and that was a lot of fun. And it was exciting because this was the first time a friend of mine who I've known since he was a juvenile, who is now a black belt and is competing against one of the best in the world. And that's phenomenal. But favorite match I've ever seen that I was not a part of, he says?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. I have a lot. Maybe, does it have to be, Jeff, if you're still watching the match, does it have to be something that was like a tournament match? Because I had something I saw that was incredible that wasn't a tournament match, whereas a lot of tournament matches I quantify based on like the finish or who was in it.
Should we go with the first option if he doesn't get back to us?
Okay. If I had to go off of a match or a grapple that I had seen, there was Marcelo Garcia came and did a small in-house seminar, and nobody knew really about this seminar except for like 30 really close friends. And one of the guys out of Gracie Newbern in North Carolina used to train at Marcelo's, and he was a doctor. Reached out to Marcelo and was like, listen, I want to put together a seminar for you, but we have a very small school. And I know if I put out this seminar, it's going to, like, all the spots are going to go to like random people in the area. What I'd rather do is not market this seminar, invite like my closest friends or like high level people I know would really appreciate this, and keep it like at a small number and at a decent price point to make it worth your time to come down, and we'll have this seminar. And so it was like just 30 really good people at this event. And, I got to roll with Marcelo and some other stuff, and that was great. But watching Marcelo roll that day with everybody and the way in which he effortlessly moved, and then knowing how Pedro rolls when he's with me, but at his slightly advanced age and with his injuries, watching that was so awesome for me, because it was like having a glimpse at what a younger Pedro would have been like. Because we see the Mr. Utah fight, we see some other things, and we have an idea, but it's such a small video. Like the Mr. Utah fight, such a small clip. Watching Marcelo for like an hour roll with these people like live and in color was like so phenomenal for me, because I just rolled with him and felt everything he did. And I know he's not really doing a lot physically. He's so efficient with his movement. So like watching him that whole day, it's hard to pinpoint, but that day was eye-opening, and it wasn't a match and it wasn't anything. And then as far as matches go, I have so many with regards to like close friends. Like when I watched Greg Walker beat DJ Jackson at his own game, like that was phenomenal. Watching, like I said, DeAndre grapple Joao Miao and seeing like one of the people I knew since he was a juvenile, like the guy who's actually responsible for calling me the mongoose, watching him then grapple Joao Miao, that was big. Seeing one of my students, Hannah Davis, win her first Toro Cup match. Even she's a blue belt, still a very valuable match for me to watch, and stuff like that. Anytime someone who had been to one of my seminars and then they send me a video of something that they learned from my seminar doing it, like this gal, Casey Schilling, who's from the Midwest, doing a star sweep 2 weeks after I showed her how to do it at a tournament. People showing me Darce footage, people showing me leg lock footage, you know, that stuff, it's near and dear to me, because that's, you know, me proliferating, right? Me putting stuff out there that's coming back. So it's cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, thank you massively for your time, Dave. Really appreciate how generous you've been with that. Is there anything you want to kind of promote, talk about, stick out there for people to find? Or
yeah, I'll add one thing. You know, I grew up very poor and with a big target on my back as a overweight redheaded kid. So it's hard to picture this, but my hair used to be bright red and curly, and I was 200 pounds in the 8th grade, and I got picked on a lot. And martial arts for me was my saving grace. Like I learned to defend myself, and I got into a lot of school fights, and eventually I learned how to get out of fights. And if I was getting into fights, I wasn't getting hurt. So I think it's important for people to appreciate the value that martial arts gives us in terms of like physical confidence and the social benefits to just that idea that once you feel empowered, that in and of itself takes that target off of your back. People that are bullies and I group bullies in with all other kinds of predators. People that are bullies look for the weak link, right? Like the wolf isn't going to chase down the biggest, strongest looking thing in the pack. It's going to look for the sickly one, the one that's kind of off to the side. So if you could take anything away from it, the truest benefit to doing martial arts is confidence that it brings you. Just got to make sure it's a healthy dose so that you're not overly confident. And if you can get to a point where you're not putting a different kind of target on you, because overconfident people draw a different kind of attention too, you're not going to be a victim anymore, right? You're going to have a different level of vigilance. You're going to, you know, not exude that soft target look, and that just brings you a better quality of life. If I had anything to give, it would just be like, instructors, don't be mad if your students leave. As long as you instilled in them a little bit of extra confidence, you did your job. Do we want everybody to get to black belt and beyond and, you know, contribute to the future of this sport? Of course. But when people leave, you can't take it personal. It can be for a ton of different reasons. Just, did you do your part to make that person better than when they came in your door? So I don't care if any of my students compete. If none of them compete, I'm still going to be happy. I'm grateful that Hannah Davis competes and some of my other students do, because it showcases that they have the ability to do this, and that's great. But if they never did, it wouldn't bother me. I can say, let me think, every member of the Brute Squad, right, Rob? Has every single member of the Brute Squad competed except for Mike Peake, right?
Yeah, I think except for Mike, yeah.
Because Joe Rudd, Chris, Davis, and Chris McMahon. But yeah, Joe Rudd, Hannah, Chicken Biscuit. We have a guy named Chicken Biscuit.
I mean, I don't know if the mall's.
The mall has. Yeah. US Grappling. Yeah. Yeah. So fortunately for me, I've had a large group of my students compete and have, you know, different levels of success, but mostly good. I'm grateful. So the bigger thing is I know that these are people that go into their lives a little bit more confident because of what it gives them. So that was be my last ending message. Just take from it the social benefits and go with that.
Nice.
Perfect.
And if you're
Perfect.
playing a game of Magic the Gathering against me and I'm at 1 life, you're about to lose. That's for Bill Jones.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'll let me hit stop on this so that we
Cool, thanks. I'll stick with you
Thanks,
guys through the end. Post-credit stuff for
Okay.
the non-normals.
for the exactly. Here we go for the stories, for the real stories. And let me